Memes live and die, but some deserve to be immortalized. After UFC 300 this past weekend, it hit me that there are so many new fans of the sport that don't know about the rich meme heritage of the UFC.
That's f***ing illegal.
And I feel like it's my duty to bridge that gap. So welcome to volume 1 of the official UFC meme guide. I'm going to do exactly what the title says and guide you through some of the MMA memes that shaped the fandom before 2020. I won't get them all, but I'll do my damn best. Whether you're here to stroll down memory lane or here to learn something new, I guarantee by the end of this video, you'll walk away with a greater appreciation of the memes that built the sport as we know it. Imagine owning all of Troy Roberts' greatest hits all in one place. Hits like Can't Win Nothing. I can't win nothing. I can't win it all. Or the pop classic, Never Mind, I Just Won a Lot of Money. I just won a lot of money all by myself. I'm the best to ever do it like nobody else. And who can forget the soulful sound of My Wife's Boyfriend Stole All the Money I Won. My wife's boyfriend just stole all the money. During this limited once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, you can own all 69 of Troy's greatest hits by using code TROY to sign up on Underdog Fantasy, and they'll match your deposit up to $100. Disclaimer, you cannot actually own any of Troy's greatest hits, but Underdog will actually match your deposit up to $100. The Just Bleed guy. It was a beautiful day on Thursday, October 16th, 1997. Bruce Buffer was in the middle of announcing Mark Kerr versus Greg Stott, and just as the camera shifted from Stott to Kerr, something magnificent happened. One of the cameras just happened to pan through the crowd and reveal a legend. Yes, I'm talking about the Just Bleed guy, whose real name is James Larsen. James actually got into the sport through cockfighting, and I'm not talking about the kind that you and the boys do under the covers. James himself did an interview where he talked about how he used to bet on cockfighting and got to a point where he started watching dog fights, and that was just too far, and it was so gruesome that he couldn't do animal fights anymore. To satiate his love for violence, he shifted his focus to man-on-man action, and thus, one of the greatest fans in MMA history was born. Maybe unsurprisingly to a lot of people, James would go on to go to prison for 10 years because he was found with 30 ecstasy pills in his possession. And today he's no longer in prison, but he's a 50-something-year-old accountant who doesn't watch a lick of MMA anymore. Regardless of him watching or not, the man's a pioneer for MMA memes, so to me, he'll always be one of us. James, I highly doubt you'll ever see this, but if you do, we miss you and we need you back. Swangin' and bangin'. You already know Derek Lewis is the man who coined the phrase, "My balls is hot." He also has a few others that were MMA staples about 8 years ago. And those staples that circulated through the MMA community all originated from the same exact post-fight interview after he took on Roy Big Country Nelson, in a fight that I like to call the Battle of the Bellies. The fight was actually considered very boring by most fans' standard because despite both men having incredible knockout power, Roy established the clinch early and often and did quite a bit of laying and praying. Derek, on the other hand, was trying to take his head off anytime the two stood up. It all came down to a split decision that ended up naming Derek Lewis as the winner, and the Las Vegas crowd booed Derek Lewis because Roy Nelson was a hometown favorite. In that moment, with all the bright lights shining on him, Derek became the Shakespeare of our time and dropped not one, not two, but 4 memorable lines that would end up circulating through the MMA community for years. Those phrases included, "Shit, it is what it is," "Swangin' and bangin'," "Fuck we all talking about, black beast up in this hoe," and "H-Town on that boy." I'd play the entire clip for you, but the UFC will copyright the living dick out of me and force me to live under Dana White's desk in a cage. So I'm not going to do that. But I will link the video somewhere up here if you want to check it out. After this interview, you could see those phrases circulating through social media anytime Derek Lewis was brought up or anytime someone just wanted to talk about swangin' and bangin'. If you've heard any of those phrases or even used them yourself, you have Derek Lewis the poet to thank for it. Gay Jesus. In 2015, Yoel Romero came under a lot of fire after he said something in his post-fight interview that sounded a lot like, "No gay for Jesus."
Go for Jesus, not for gay Jesus, people.
This was controversial for obvious reasons, but the main one was that gay marriage had been legalized right around that time, and so many people thought that Yoel was taking an anti-gay stance. There was a lot of backlash on social media directed at the UFC and Yoel, but many people defended Yoel, saying that it was clearly some sort of language barrier thing going on. To start that interview, Yoel even says that he's going to try to say something in English, which was something that he didn't normally do. Regardless of how controversial it was, people in the MMA community use gay Jesus as a meme or no gay for Jesus still to this day. This is still my boy. At UFC 194, Chris Weidman took on Luke Rockhold and was knocked out in the process. After the fight, Joe Rogan gave Chris the mic to talk about the loss, and after Chris finished with his post-fight speech, his own dad grabbed the mic and said this. Most fans at the time felt like the interaction was pretty awkward, and if you zoom in on Chris's face says to me that he wishes that his dad never came back with the milk, but I can't fault Chris's dad. It's clear that the guy just wanted to tell the world that he's still proud of his son despite the loss. Nonetheless, the phrase got turned into a meme, and anytime a fighter lost that people were rooting for, you were bound to see "this is still my boy" comments below. Fake ass, cheap shotting, fake respect, humility, bitch. During the face-off between Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm, Ronda Rousey became extremely aggressive towards Holly, who at the time was very well liked among fans. After the face-off, Ronda posted this to her Instagram, and we got the absolute gem: fake ass, cheap shotting, fake respect, humility, bitch. When Ronda was still in the UFC, anytime she was discussed on social media, you were bound to see this comment somewhere in there. And you'd also see fans using it anytime another fighter got extremely aggressive towards a fighter that they were going against. Stand and Wang. In 2007, Andy Wang was a contestant on the 5th season of The Ultimate Fighter. Andy was a very skilled Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, and wisely, his coach BJ Penn advised him to take his opponent, Brandon Melendez, down because Brandon was a much more experienced striker. During the fight, Andy proceeded to not listen to any of that advice, and you can hear BJ Penn screaming, "Take him down," to which he didn't listen, and Andy would go on to lose that fight by decision. After he lost that decision, he sat in the octagon and cried. This moment birthed 2 iconic memes. Stand and Wang, which is obviously a play on words for stand and bang because of what Andy went in there and did. But not only that, after Andy was able to collect himself and do a post-fight interview, he talked about the loss and said that when people look at him, they'll look at him and say, "There is a warrior," which birthed another meme: Andy Wang is a warrior. Anytime someone uttered the words warrior on a forum, you could bet your sweet ass that you'd find commenters saying Andy Wang is a warrior just randomly out of nowhere. I'm not impressed by your performance. On September 23rd, 2006, things were much simpler. Joe Rogan's head was smaller, Affliction was cool to wear, and Matt Hughes had just taken the belt from BJ Penn at UFC 63. And after that win, GSP stepped into the cage and dropped what is probably the meanest line ever dropped by a Canadian.
But I'm not impressed by your performance.
I'm not even kidding that when I say in 2006, that might have been the hardest line anyone in that crowd had ever heard. "I'm not impressed by your performance" became iconic in that moment. And it would go on to be used as a meme hundreds of thousands of times, if not millions of times by now. It really is one of the few memes that stood the test of time because I still see it pretty frequently to this day. When it happened, the phrase was so popular that someone even took the time to make a song about it. Unfortunately, GSP, being the Canadian that he is, would come to regret it. In an interview in 2015, he looked back on the comment and said that it was very low class of him to go in there and ruin Matt's celebration. And for that reason, GSP is the kindest, most empathetic killer of all time. Ronda Rousey shadowboxing. This one won't take much explaining. Ronda was absolutely infamous for her terrible shadowboxing, so much so that fans began to mimic her at UFC events. There's more than a few compilations of just her shadowboxing on YouTube, and there's not really much of an explanation needed on why it became a meme. She's just really, really bad at shadowboxing. Let me bang, bro. In season 16 of The Ultimate Fighter, Julian Lane was a contestant. Unfortunately for him, he ended up losing pretty early on and began to get homesick in the house. He drunkenly came up with the bright idea to start trying to fight people in the house so that he could potentially get sent home. As other members of the house tried to prevent him from doing something stupid, he began repeating the famous words.
Let me bang, man.
To which one of his housemates responded, "I do let you bang, bro." Julian still fights to this day as a bare-knuckle boxer, but he's since admitted that when he goes back and watches that footage from The Ultimate Fighter, he thinks it's pretty cringy. And to that, I say, Julian, there's nothing to regret. I can't think of a single thing that screams combat sports more than just wanting to bang your bros. Stitch Duran was never my friend. When the UFC inked their deal with Reebok in 2014, it meant that they could no longer wear their personal sponsors on their shorts anymore. For many of them, that meant missing out on a significant amount of money. What many people don't know is that this also affected Cutmen as well. Cutmen would also wear their sponsors on their clothing, and when the UFC inked this deal with Reebok, it hurt their pockets too. Stitch Duran was a cut man for the UFC, and he said something to the media along the lines of, now with this new deal in place, you'll likely see a lot of the cut men in the UFC do more boxing than UFC because of how badly this hurt their pockets. He ended up being let go by the UFC shortly after these comments were made, and he said that he thought that Dana White was his friend and he would have preferred a personal phone call from Dana when he got fired. Dana was asked about this entire situation with Duran in an interview, to which he responded,
Stitch Duran was never my friend.
the only thing that I can think of that's maybe worse than someone who you thought was your friend telling the world on TV that they were never your friend is maybe an ex telling everybody that she knows that you've got a 2-inch Punisher. Not that I would know from experience or anything. Anyways, you definitely still see this one around today. Anytime you see someone say, blank was never my friend, it's in reference to this very moment. R.I.P. Joe Rogan. You've probably seen in live streams for the UFC or on Dana White's live streams that there are always comments that say either RIP Joe Rogan or Joe Rogan is dead. The birth of that meme actually stems from this Ballsack Sports looking article from 2014. The article says that Joe Rogan passed away from DMT overdose and he left all of his belongings to Anderson Silva. In the comments of that article, you can see a user that goes by the name of 420 Everyday leave what might have been the first ever RIP Joe Rogan. A Twitter user that's now banned that went by the name of Knickknack would go on to tag Joe Rogan with the article linked, and he stated that he would miss Joe. And Joe responded to that tweet with one of his own that said, I'm alive as f***, son, hashtag rumor killer. This entire meme just reminds me of how important Joe Rogan is to the sport, so Joe, I'm gonna need you to up your cold baths and your sauna because we need you to live to at least 100. I want to fuck Chuck. In the build-up to UFC 79, Wanderlei Silva accidentally confessed his undying love and sexual attraction to Chuck Liddell by saying he wanted to fuck him.
I want to fight with Chuck.
And if I'm being honest, nobody blames you, Wanderlei. It's really easy to see why it is that you felt that way about Chuck. Tony Ferguson, the type of guy. Unfortunately, the true origins of this meme are still a mystery, but it did come about around the same time that the Drake is the type of guy meme circulated. And the Drake meme would just be jokes about Drake is the type of guy to do blank. And generally, it would always be something that was pretty feminine or a little zesty at best. So I would assume that that meme inadvertently birthed the Tony Ferguson type of guy meme. In the case of Tony, the Tony is the type of guy memes always had to do with Tony being a little bizarre because he is a little bizarre. Some examples include Tony Ferguson, the type of guy to sprawl when his grandma hugs him, or Tony Ferguson's the type of guy to turn off his bedroom light with a spinning elbow. And my personal favorite, Tony's the type of guy to interrupt his own kid during his first words. I truly am sorry that I couldn't find the exact origins of this one, but all I can say to that is Tony's the type of guy whose memes have no origin because Tony Ferguson is the universe and we are Tony Ferguson. Giblert. In 2014, the UFC made a bold move to move away from their NASCAR-style sponsoring where fighters could display their own personal sponsors on their shorts, and instead moved to a more conventional sponsorship deal with Reebok. When Reebok listed the new fighter kits on their website for sale, they f***ed up monumentally by misspelling some of the names, or in some cases, just getting the names completely wrong. The most meme-worthy of those names came from Gilbert Melendez's kit because they spelled his name Giblert. Giblert quickly circulated through MMA forums and social media. Some of the other names that they messed up include Anderson Aldo, which I can only assume is what you get when Anderson Silva and Jose Aldo do the fusion dance. There was also Marcio Lyoto Machida, Mark Hughes, Kevin Swanson, Gleason Alves, and to top it all off, they listed all of the Chinese fighters' names backwards. Not surprisingly at all, there were a lot more that they messed up, but I think you get the point. I used to f guys like you in high school. In season 24 of The Ultimate Fighter, Joseph Benavidez and Henry Cejudo faced off, and in an attempt to display his masculine dominance over Henry, Joseph Benavidez dropped the most heterosexual line of all time.
I used to guys like you in high school.
While a lot of people think that Joseph just happened to misspeak in the heat of the moment, I think this clip from that same season shows that Joe meant exactly what he said.
Suck him off, get him.
Hanging with the boys. On season 25 of The Ultimate Fighter, coach Cody Garbrandt, who self-admittedly called himself a lightweight when it comes to alcohol, decided to drink with his team. And in the process, he began to act like a college freshman at his first kickback and started yelling,
Hanging with the boys! Hanging with the boys! Hanging with the boys!
He would go on to say this phrase something like 5 times in the span of this one scene, and people loved it so much, hanging with the boys became an MMA meme staple. That's f***ing illegal. Everyone's seen Dana White say,
That's f***ing illegal.
but what you may not know is its true origins. In an interview, Dana White was asked about comments that he had made about another promotion, Elite Extreme Combat. Dana proceeds to go on a tirade about how the promotion needs to be investigated because they self-admittedly paid their fighter Seth Petrozelli to not take his opponent down. Dana rightfully pointed out how this was a scumbag move because people who were betting on the fight had no idea that from within the promotion, they'd secretly rigged the fight for Seth not to take his opponent to the ground. And that's how That's F***ing Illegal was born. Hold on, I'm talking, brother. Just before UFC 216, where Tony Ferguson was set to take on Kevin Lee as the main event, Tony found himself at a media luncheon where he was being interviewed. During the entire interview, Tony seemed a little bit agitated, but that could probably just be chalked up to the weight cut that he was doing, and because the media was asking him stupid questions like, what would the belt mean to you? Just to Tony's left, Fabricio Verdum was also being interviewed by Karen Bryant, and they were having a conversation in Portuguese. Because the two were placed so close together, you could actually hear their conversation bleeding over into Tony's, as Tony was in the middle of answering his own interview question, and Tony went on to cut off Fabricio by saying this.
Hold on, I'm talking, brother.
Verdum proceeds to get so upset that he goes off on Tony for 2 minutes before he was eventually escorted out of the luncheon. But not before Tony dropped a bonus meme on us.
Daniel, what the fuck are you talking about? Shut up before I ankle pick you.
Tony Ferguson does the impossible and gifts us 2 memes in less than 2 minutes. Whoever's idea it was to place 2 angry fighters being interviewed next to each other at a lunch table was an absolute moron, but I think in this case, we all owe them a huge thank you. Be a warrior. It was UFC Fight Night 125, and Valentina Shevchenko was making her flyweight debut against Priscilla Cachoeira. The fight was more one-sided than the drunken Tinder DMs that I like to send out. Valentina dominated every facet of the fight, and in the second round, she was delivering some nasty ground and pound on Priscilla, who was firing absolutely nothing back. During these moments, critics of the fight, including other referees like Mark Goddard, felt like the fight should have been stopped a long time ago. However, the fight ended up not being stopped until Priscilla tapped twice. To put into perspective how bad the fight really was, Valentina landed 200 strikes to Priscilla's 3. You probably already guessed it, but the referee in charge of the fight was none other than Mario Yamasaki, who obviously received a hefty amount of backlash, including backlash from Dana White himself, who called him a moron and an idiot. Mario would put out this statement where he defended his actions, and it included this little tidbit where he said that he was trying to let Priscilla be a warrior. He began jokingly using the phrase, "I'm allowing so-and-so to be a warrior," anytime a referee allowed a fight to go on a little bit too long. Needless to say, that was the last fight that Mario ever refereed in the UFC because Dana White would ban him shortly after. GSLee. After suffering 2 back-to-back losses to Al Quinta and RDA, Kevin Lee decided it was time for him to switch gyms. He settled on the Canadian gym TriStar, which was where GSP trained under the legendary Firas Zahabi. In Kevin's next fight, he KO'd Gregor Gillespie with a nasty head kick. Fans immediately took notice of the improvements in Kevin's game and started to refer to him as GSLee or Lee SP. Where does Kevin Lee fit into all of this? The greatest athlete we've ever seen, the man with the biggest, strongest arms, who hails from West Linn, Oregon, started asking this very question on his YouTube channel years ago.
How's Kevin Lee fit into this?
Because Chael asked the question so many times, people just began repeating, where does Kevin Lee fit into all of this? You'd see the comment absolutely everywhere on anything having to do with anything close to MMA. The origins of why Chael started saying that might actually surprise you because it all has to do with a cat. Chael actually didn't know who Kevin Lee was until one of his former wrestling coaches asked him to have Kevin on his podcast. But Chael didn't actually get around to interviewing him for a while, and during that time, Chael ended up moving houses. When he moved, he ran into an unexpected problem where his cat would keep running to the old house and Chael would have to go there to pick him up. Through their mutual wrestling coach, I guess Kevin Lee got wind of the situation and sent Chael some life-changing advice. He told Chael to create a barrier with cat litter around the house, and that would cause the cat to stay. And lo and behold, the advice worked. Chael had Kevin on the podcast, and the two hit it off immediately. And Chael liked him so much that he wanted to use his platform on his YouTube channel to make sure that he was always generating a little bit of buzz in the UFC around Kevin Lee. And if you don't believe me, you can actually go here and listen to Chael tell the full story himself. Number 1 bullshit. After Conor McGregor's win over Eddie Alvarez at UFC 205, Khabib Nurmagomedov asked a reporter if he thought that he would be next in line to fight Conor for the belt. The reporter responded by saying that Khabib deserved it, but Conor and Dana could go in a completely different direction if they wanted to. And Khabib replied by saying what everybody else was thinking.
This is #1 bullshit.
Which of course became an iconic moment and a saying for MMA fans around the world.
This is #1 bullshit.
The Lava Shack. UFC great BJ Penn had a pretty tumultuous tail end to his career. To end his career, he went on a 7-fight losing streak, and he had multiple run-ins with the law on top of other personal issues. He had a restraining order filed against him by his ex-girlfriend. He got into multiple fights outside of the UFC, including one with a bouncer. He got a DUI. And the final straw before he would ultimately get released by the UFC was when he got into a fight in front of a bar called the Lava Shack. During this fight, BJ would put his guard down and tell the man that he was fighting to hit him in the face in an effort to display his iron chin. But he got knocked out cold. The fight community didn't miss a beat and started jokingly referring to the Lava Shack as a legendary MMA gym in Hawaii. Wow, very fantastic body. Nearly 15 years ago, Alistair Overeem was greeting eager fans in Japan. And one of these Japanese fans just happened to be his #1 fan. Someone happened to capture this moment of this Japanese fan running around saying, "I love you" to Overeem and jumping around excitedly. And then when Alistair stopped to sign some autographs, the man was so awestruck that all he could say was this.
Whoa! Very fantastic body!
Of course, MMA fans thought it was hilarious and also agreed with the fan and started repeating the phrase and reposting it everywhere. Immigrant mentality. During a passionate rant on JRE, comedian Joey Diaz goes on a tangent about how Stipe Miocic is a crazy bastard who could take on anyone, including Brock Lesnar, because of his immigrant mentality.
Miocic, I love him. He's got that immigrant mentality.
Although Stipe was born in America, Joey is technically right because Stipe is Croatian, and his parents are, of course, Croatian immigrants. He's gone on various other rants where he talks about the importance of immigrant mentality and how that can be the deciding factor in a fight, and he of course famously gets a lot of fighters' names wrong. Some of those names include Stiopic, Tyrone Woodley, Khabib, and Tony Henderson. Tito face. After beating Wanderlei Silva at Bellator 180, Chael Sonnen gets on the mic and does what Chael does, and he starts ripping Tito Ortiz a new asshole. All while Tito looks on from the crowd in shock. Huge shout out to the cameraman who did a spectacular side-by-side of Tito Ortiz reacting to everything Chael said, and Tito's facial expression during the entire thing just became the meme. That also happens to be the same exact face that I made while looking at the solar eclipse the other day. Although the coveted Tito face isn't seen that much today, it was used religiously online about 7 or 8 years ago, and it still does make its appearances here and there. The real Nigerian nightmare. Before Mike Perry became a bare-knuckle boxing legend, he was a walking, talking MMA meme. Because of that, I combined all of Mike Perry's meme into one section. Of course, we've got the legendary Mike Perry weigh-in shriek. We've got his pre-fight dances. We also have the time he faked a handshake at UFC 202 during the weigh-ins and said, "You thought you had a friend, boy, ah." And just when you thought we were done, you can't forget the time that Mike did his own DNA test and found out that he was 2% African.
And I was 2% African, so I am legally allowed to say the word nigga.
Which of course is what birthed the Mike Perry memes that say that he's the greatest Nigerian fighter of all time, aka the real Nigerian nightmare. It wasn't all just sunshine and rainbows for Mike though, because his N-word pass would end up getting him a fair bit of criticism and somehow get him into a beef with Michael Jai White. I'm gonna wrap the entire Mike Perry section up by giving you the 3 truths I've found in this world. Mike Perry's black, Chael Sonnen's undefeated, and Tito Ortiz will outlive his children. I can't let you get close. One of the most iconic MMA memes ever created originated from The Ultimate Fighter Brazil 3 when Chael Sonnen and Wanderlei Silva were coaches. Chael was known for making fun of Brazilians, so he and Wanderlei off the bat didn't get along very well. And earlier in this particular episode, Wanderlei got so upset with Chael that he ended up pushing him. And it was at this moment that Chael ended up making a vow to himself because Wanderlei took what was a verbal argument and turned it physical. that the next time Vanderlei got within arm's reach of him, he was just going to assume it was a fight. And Chael would stay very true to that promise because later on in that episode, Vanderlei would come up to Chael very aggressively, and as Vanderlei closes the distance, Chael shoves him away and says,
I can't let you get close.
And that's not all. Earlier in this same scene, we had another 2 bonus memes that can still be read in comment sections today. Before Vanderlei approaches Chael, he says swoon a few times, which was telling him that he wanted to beat his ass soon. And right after that, just before Chael shoves him away, Vanderlei keeps saying something that sounds like what now, which evolved into the meme wanna now.
Wanna know? Wanna know?
Super necessary. While a finish in 5 seconds would be rookie numbers for some of us, for Jorge Masvidal, his 5-second finish ended up being a UFC record. As you know, the historic knockout's been played over and over and over during UFC promos, and probably will be until the end of time. In the post-fight press conference, Jorge was talking to a reporter, and the reporter told him that the knockout received some criticism because the shots that he gave Askren after the knee seemed a bit unnecessary. And Jorge, of course, countered by saying that they were super necessary.
The punches weren't really necessary.
They were super necessary.
While the saying and the meme definitely live on today, those same words would come back to haunt Jorge Masvidal after he was knocked out at UFC 261 by Kamaru Usman, who also said that his follow-up shots on Jorge were super necessary. Red Panty Night. During the UFC 197 press conference, Conor McGregor introduced us to Red Panty Night when he asked RDA if he would take the chance to fight him if the UFC presented it. And Conor goes on to answer his own question by saying, of course you would. When you fight me, it's a celebration. I'll change your bum life. And of course...
Yeah, it's Red Panty Night when you decide to fight me, eh?
Over the years, there's been a little bit of a debate on whether or not Red Panty Night actually changes a fighter's life, because Donald Cerrone said that he only got paid $200,000 to fight Conor McGregor in an event that made over $80 million. But I think that was more of a case of Donald Cerrone not negotiating well, because Jose Aldo said that Red Panty Night definitely is real and he's friends with Conor McGregor to this day because of it. And of course, if we needed more proof, we've got Michael Chandler waiting 2 years to fight Conor in hopes of just one Red Panty Night, which tells me Red Panty Night definitely has some truth to it. Who the fuck is that guy? At the UFC 205 press conference, a reporter asked Conor McGregor who on stage would give him the hardest fight. And Jeremy Stevens interrupts the question by saying that he would give Conor the toughest fight because he's the hardest hitting 145er around. And Conor would hit him with what has to be one of the hardest clapbacks I've ever seen in sports, period.
Who the fuck is that guy? Who the fuck is that?
And at the expense of Jeremy Stevens, a meme so strong that it transcended MMA was born. 10 years ago, Coach James Larsen gave Brian Ortega a choice. In early 2019, Brian Ortega inked a new deal with Modelo. And with that new deal came a new Modelo commercial that the UFC played so much that sometimes it felt like they took their dick out and were literally trying to ear it into your brain. If you don't remember, here's a snippet to jog your memory.
10 years ago, Coach James Larsen gave Brian Ortega a choice.
It was played so much that that starting phrase just became its own meme. Khabib's tiramisu. Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov has to be the most cursed fight of all time. The fight itself was booked and canceled 4 times. The third cancellation happened just before UFC 209, and it was due to Khabib being hospitalized for weight-cutting complications. This caused Tony to coin the phrase Tiramisu Tuesdays. And this was because during an episode of UFC Countdown, Khabib is seen in a restaurant in the lead up to the fight, ordering 3 orders of tiramisu. Tony would continue to make jokes about tiramisu and tiramisu being the reason that Khabib couldn't make weight. Khabib has maintained to this day that he's never even tried tiramisu, despite the video of him ordering it. But that has not stopped the MMA community for absolutely dogging him about his secret love for tiramisu. We believe you, Khabib. We really do. Why is God testing Jon Jones? We all know about the turmoil that Jon Jones has faced outside of the octagon. He crashed his Bentley into a post in New York City in 2012. Then he had a hit and run with a pregnant lady in 2015 where he fled the scene. He had his numerous failed drug tests, and the list goes on, but you get the point. Each time Jon was faced with some sort of controversy or a situation that he put himself in, he would always come back and face the public and say something along the lines of God was testing him. I don't know if Jon knows how tests work, but generally, after you take a test and fail, you're supposed to prepare so that you don't fail the next time, and Jon continually seems to fail. And I'm right there with you, Jon. Just the other day, my girlfriend asked me why am I on Instagram liking pictures of big titty goth girls, and I just let her know it's just God testing me yet again. From the looks of it, this meme will continue to age well because Jon just got in trouble again for allegedly telling a drug tester that he was going to kill her. But it's all good, Jon. I'm sure this one is just another one of God's greatest tests. Hey, pussy, are you still there? This one doesn't need a ton of explaining. In the build-up to UFC 178, DC and Jon Jones sat down for an interview on ESPN. While both of them thought that the cameras were off, they were able to still hear each other through their earpieces. Jon waits until the coast is clear and starts shit-talking to DC and opens with the infamous line,
"Hey pussy, are you still there?"
This is another case where I'd like to just play the full exchange because of how great it is, but I can't because I'll get copyrighted faster than you can say how taste my pee-pee. From this one clip, people of course still reference the "hey pussy, are you still there" line. There's also another line from this same exchange that people still use to this day, and it's DC's response to Jon threatening to kill him.
Jon, do you think I'm just gonna sit there and let you kill me, Jon?
How taste my pee-pee. Andrei Arlovsky's ex-girlfriend decided to keep it in the MMA family after the two broke up, and she began dating fellow fighter Tim Sylvia after things with her and Arlovsky ended. Ariel Helwani, of course, had to ask Andrei how he felt about this entire situation, and Andrei responded how I think every man should respond to this question.
Tim, how's taste my pee-pee-pee, okay? All right.
Years later in an interview, Andrei would disclose where he got the idea to drop this line, and apparently one of his teammates said if he ever came face to face with Tim Sylvia and he was talking shit, just ask him how taste my pee-pee. And of course, the rest is history. The Diaz Brothers. It goes without saying that the Diaz brothers had a massive impact on MMA, and that definitely includes the memes. For the sake of simplicity and because a lot of these don't take much explaining, I've compiled some of the most noteworthy memes from the Diaz brothers and just put them all in this one section. At the very top, we have what probably is Nick Diaz's most iconic line where he tells KJ Noons, "Don't be scared, homie."
No, don't be scared, homie.
And then there was the time that Nick Diaz reinvented the meaning of wolf tickets in the lead up to his fight with GSP. Wolf tickets was a phrase that existed long before Nick Diaz, and it usually referred to someone making threats with no intentions of carrying them out, very similar to the saying crying wolf.
You know, they're selling y'all wolf tickets, people. You're eating them right up.
However, in the way that Nick was using it, he framed it as the UFC was trying to sell wolf tickets or stir up drama and frame him as the bad guy, and then frame GSP as the good guy in order to sell tickets. Because of this, at the time, many fans just began parroting the phrase wolf tickets. And then we have Nate, who of course also has some notable memes. My favorite of which is when he accused Conor McGregor of playing touch butt in the park with his coach.
You're playing touch butt with that dork in the park.
And then of course there's the line that he's most famous for after the huge upset win over Conor McGregor.
Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
Like I said, there's not much to explain with these ones. All I can really say is, God damn do I love the Diaz brothers. Head movement! Amanda Nunes took Ronda Rousey's soul at UFC 207. But just before Ronda got TKO'd, Ronda's coach Edmond Tarverdian can be heard in her corner going absolutely nuts, yelling, "Head movement!" right before things took a turn for the worst. For a little more context, even before this moment, Edmond was criticized for, well, being just a kind of a shitty coach. Today, many in the MMA community blame him for Ronda's downfall in MMA. What happened to Ronda actually wouldn't be the last time that the head movement curse would strike, because in 2018, Tarverdian would be coaching Vanez Martirosyan in the biggest boxing match of his entire career against Triple G. And just before Vanez got knocked out in round 2, Edmond's corner advice was also, "Head movement!" The GOAT. To end this video, I know that there's a lot of debate over who is the greatest of all time in the sport. And I know it's not a meme, but you made it this far in the video, so I wanted to talk about it. The truth is, it's not really a debate at all. When you see people reference the GOAT, they're just talking about Chael Sonnen. The man never lost a single round in his entire career. If you look up his record, it will say that he did lose, but I just wanted to let you know that that is 100% disinformation. And if you ever happen to stumble upon actual video footage of him losing, just know that all of that footage is fabricated by AI and completely fake. And now you, a fan of MMA who has a deep understanding of the sport and its history of memes, now know that there's only one true GOAT, and he hails from the mean streets of West Lynn, Oregon. As always, thank you guys for taking the time to watch the video. And if you're feeling generous, every like, comment, and subscription really does help the channel. Let me know in the comments below if you learned some memes in this video that you didn't know previously. And if you guys end up liking this video, there will be a volume 2 and maybe even a volume 3.